The clinking of silverware and laughter filled the long mahogany table, echoing off the polished walls of my parents' dining room. Everyone looked picture-perfect. My brother in his tailored suit, my sister-in-law flashing her diamond bracelet, my mother in pearls. And then there was me, the so-called failure who once dared to chase a dream instead of a paycheck. I sat quietly, swirling the Cabernet in my glass, the deep red catching the chandelier's glow. The silk of my ivory blouse brushed against my wrist as I reached for the water jug, pretending not to hear the jab that floated down the table. "So, Emma," my cousin chuckled, "how's that little business of yours?" "Still surviving." The laughter that followed was polite but cutting. My heart gave a small, familiar twist, not pain exactly, but the echo of it. I smiled, the same polite smile I'd worn for years, and took a slow sip. They didn't know. They had no idea. The world they thought I'd lost myself in had become something far greater than any of them could imagine. I'd kept it that way, my success tucked neatly behind NDAs, quiet investments, and private accounts. Then my phone buzzed beside my plate. A notification. I glanced down, and there it was. My latest deposit, fresh from a merger they couldn't even dream of. I locked the screen, steadying my breath. Tonight, I thought, setting the phone beside my wine glass, tonight they'll find out who failed and who didn't. 3 years ago, I was sitting at the same table, same seats, same smug smiles, but I was a different woman. My hands had trembled as I unfolded my proposal, the ink on my business plan still fresh from the cheap printer I could barely afford. "I'm starting a company," I'd said, voice shaky but hopeful. "A digital retail platform focused on women-led brands. It's small now, but I have a plan to grow." Laughter cut me off before I could finish. My brother, Luke, leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Emma, you couldn't even keep a steady job for 6 months. What makes you think you can run a business?" My mother sighed, shaking her head. "Honey, dreams are nice, but reality is bills. Maybe you should think about something safer." My throat tightened. I try to keep my voice even, to not let the sting show. "I don't want safe. I want something that's mine." My father's silence was the worst part, the quiet disappointment that said more than any words could. The air smelled like roast beef and judgment. My palms were slick against the printed pages I'd spent nights perfecting. When dinner ended, I'd gathered my things in silence, heart pounding like a drum. My grandmother, the only one who hadn't laughed, touched my arm as I passed her chair. She slipped a small leather-bound journal into my hand. "Keep this," she whispered. "Write everything down, your wins, your losses, even your fears. One day, they'll be the proof you need." That night, I drove home with tears streaking my cheeks and that journal sitting beside me on the passenger seat. I wrote my first entry at 2 a.m. They don't believe in me, but maybe I don't need them to. I promised myself something under that dim kitchen light. I would never again ask for permission to dream. The next morning, I drained the last of my savings, bought a used laptop, and registered my business name, Eden and Rise LLC. It sounded fragile then, but it was mine, and I swore I'd build it into something that could stand against every laugh, every doubt, every voice that told me to quit. The early months were brutal. I worked out of my tiny apartment in Austin, with paint peeling off the windowsills and a kitchen table that doubled as my desk. The only light came from a flickering lamp and the blue glow of my laptop screen. My savings vanished in weeks, replaced by ramen noodles, sleepless nights, and the constant hum of self-doubt. But every morning, I opened that leather journal and wrote one line before I started. Keep going. I taught myself everything: coding, branding, marketing, logistics. YouTube tutorials became my classroom, trial and error, my teacher. I remember once breaking down in tears when a client ghosted me after 3 weeks of work. But even then, I wrote it down, lesson learned. Always sign a contract. Then one evening, I got an unexpected email. A woman named Clara Evans, a retired executive who ran a women's business mentorship program, had seen one of my posts in a small online forum. She invited me for coffee. Clara became the first person outside my grandmother who truly believed in me. She was tough, brilliant, and terrifyingly honest. The kind of woman who made you want to rise to her level just by being in the same room. "You've got something rare, Emma," she told me one day. "You don't need their approval. You just need results." Under her mentorship, I learned to pitch investors, negotiate deals, and trust my instincts. Within a year, my platform had on board 50 small brands, each one run by women who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. When the first major order came through, a boutique chain in New York, I sat alone on my apartment floor, staring at the confirmation email until tears blurred the screen. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. Still, I kept quiet. My family assumed I was doing freelance work to get by. I didn't correct them. There was something intoxicating about being invisible, about knowing the truth while everyone else guessed wrong. Month by month, Eden and Rise grew. I reinvested every cent, hired a small remote team, and expanded into beauty, fashion, and wellness. By the second year, we had enough revenue to attract investors. By the third, I had my own office, minimalist, glass-walled, and sitting 20 floors above downtown Austin. But I never posted pictures. Never bragged. I'd learned that success tastes sweeter when it's quiet, when it doesn't need an audience. One night, as I closed my laptop after securing a major merger with a European brand, I caught my reflection in the dark glass. For the first time, I saw not the girl who was laughed at, but the woman who outgrew the room that mocked her. Still, a part of me knew it wasn't over. One day, I'd face them again. Not for revenge, but for closure. And when that day came, I promised myself I wouldn't say a word. I'd let the truth speak for me. The family dinner that night felt almost identical to the one 3 years before, except this time, I wasn't trembling. The table shimmered under soft golden light. The air carried the faint aroma of rosemary chicken and wine. My parents had insisted on hosting after months of not seeing me, and I'd agreed, more out of curiosity than nostalgia. They greeted me warmly, of course. Hugs, polite smiles, the usual family performance. But under it all, I sensed it, that subtle condescension, the kind people wear when they still think they're ahead. "So, Emma," Luke started as he cut into his steak, "how's that online thing you do?" He didn't even look up. "Still trying to make it big?" I smiled, taking a sip of my drink. "Trying?"
No.
"I'd say it's doing pretty well." Mom chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You're always so private, dear. I just hope it's enough to get by. You know your brother's firm just landed a $1 million account last month." Everyone turned to Luke, who nodded proudly. The table filled with applause. "That's great," I said smoothly. "Congratulations." It was almost funny, watching them celebrate mediocrity dressed in arrogance. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed again, a familiar tone that made my pulse quicken. I glanced down. Notification. Incoming deposit, $2,450,000, acquisition payout. The timing was poetic. I let the screen light up just long enough for the reflection to catch my cousin's curious eyes. "What's that?" she asked. I looked up slowly, feigning confusion. "Oh, that? Just a new partnership going through. My company finalized a merger this morning." Luke frowned. "Wait, your company? You mean that little shop website?" I set the phone down, folded my napkin, and finally met their eyes. Eden and Rise isn't a shop anymore. It's an e-commerce platform operating across 12 countries. We just sold a minority stake to a venture firm in New York. Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. My mother's fork froze midair. My father cleared his throat, confused. "How much are we talking?" he asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I leaned back, calm and deliberate. "Enough to retire comfortably. Twice." The room shifted. Laughter vanished. My brother's smirk faltered into disbelief. I could almost hear my grandmother's voice in my head. "Keep receipts, Emma. In business and in life." I stood and walked to my bag, pulling out a slim folder. Inside were printed reports, acquisition details, investor names, growth charts. Proof, in black and white, that every mockery they'd thrown my way had only sharpened my edge. "I didn't tell you before because it didn't matter whether you believed in me or not," I said, placing the folder in front of my father. But since you've all been so curious about how I'm surviving, they flipped through the pages in stunned silence. When I looked at them, the same people who'd once laughed as I cried into a steering wheel, I felt no rage, just a quiet kind of peace. Luke finally muttered, "Emma, I had no idea." "I know," I said softly. "You never ask." No one spoke for a while. Even the clinking of forks had stopped. The only sound was the ticking of the antique clock above the mantel, counting down the seconds of their stunned realization. I poured myself another glass of wine, the ruby liquid glimmering in the light. "So," I said lightly, "how's everyone else's business doing these days?" And for the first time ever, the table stayed silent. Completely, beautifully silent. The silence after my reveal lingered like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. I could feel their eyes on me, scanning for weakness, for some crack in my composure. But there wasn't any. That part of me, the girl who needed their validation, had burned away a long time ago. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice trembled slightly. "Emma, sweetheart, we never meant to discourage you. We were just worried." I smiled politely. "I know, Mom. But you didn't worry for me. You worried about being embarrassed by me." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. Luke leaned forward, his expression shifting from disbelief to something almost desperate. "Emma, I could actually use some advice. My firm's been struggling lately. Maybe we could collaborate? You know, family helping family." I tilted my head, studying him. The same man who'd once called me reckless for quitting my job was now asking for my help. "Luke," I said softly, "I'd love to help, but only if you're willing to help yourself first." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means stop measuring your worth by your paycheck. You don't need to prove you're better than everyone. You just need to be better than who you were yesterday." He didn't answer. He just stared, the weight of my words settling somewhere deep. Then I turned to my father. His hands were clasped together, the same way they were when he used to lecture me about responsibility. "Dad," I said, my tone calm but steady, "you once told me dreams don't pay bills. You were right, they don't. But purpose does. I've built something that gives hundreds of women jobs, independence, and confidence. That's my bill paid." His eyes softened. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly. I nodded. "You did. But that's okay. Just don't underestimate the next girl who dares to dream." Finally, my gaze fell on my mother again. Her eyes were glistening now. "If you really want to make it up to me," I said, "support someone else's dream without laughing first. Maybe sponsor a scholarship for young women in business, in Grandma's name." She believed when no one else did. Mom nodded, tears spilling over. "I will," she whispered. The energy around the table began to shift. The smugness had dissolved, replaced by reflection, maybe even remorse. "I'm not here to rub success in anyone's face," I said, my voice steady but kind. "I just want peace. We can rebuild, but it has to be honest this time. No more pretending one of us is better than the other." My father looked up, his voice low. "You've grown into someone I'm proud of, Emma." I smiled faintly. "I didn't grow into her, Dad. I built her." The words hung in the air like a promise that this version of me, this woman I fought to become, would never shrink again to make anyone comfortable. A few months passed after that dinner. Things changed, slowly, quietly, but genuinely. My brother started showing up differently. He called just to talk, not to compare. He even admitted he'd enrolled in a leadership course, saying he wanted to learn to listen better. It was awkwardly phrased, but I knew what he meant. My parents began volunteering at a women's business center downtown. The first time Mom texted me a photo of a group of young women she was mentoring, I cried right there in my office. Healing didn't happen overnight, but it began. As for me, I learned something too. Success doesn't feel like revenge once you've truly grown. It feels like peace. Like coming home to yourself after a long, hard journey. One Sunday morning, I visited Grandma's grave. The air was cool, the sky soft and gray. I sat on the grass, pulled out her old leather journal, and flipped through the pages, My old entries filled with fear, frustration, and dreams too big for that tiny apartment. Near the back, I found the words she'd written to me years ago. Keep receipts, in business and in life. I smiled through tears and wrote a new line beneath it. They laughed once. Now they listen. Closing the journal, I pressed my palm against its worn cover. You were right, Grandma, I whispered. I kept every receipt. As I stood and looked out over the quiet hill, a soft wind swept through the trees, like an answer. That night, back in my penthouse overlooking the city, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee. Below me, the skyline shimmered, 1,000 lights representing 1,000 stories just like mine. Women building, failing, rising again. I picked up my phone and opened a new email draft, the subject line simple: Eden and Rise Foundation launch. It was time to help others climb their own mountains. For the first time in years, I felt completely free, not from their doubt, but from needing to prove anything ever again. Because the truth is, success doesn't silence the world. It teaches you when to stop explaining yourself to it. And sometimes, the sweetest sound isn't laughter. It's silence, when the truth finally speaks for you.